we are good. I do not see anyone online right now, so I have to keep track of the camera and the speaker quite often to make sure it's working for our recording purpose. So let's go to full screen, take a look on our calendar, the events, and what we need to do to wrap up this semester. Okay, let's go full screen. Okay, full screen mode seems to be working. That's good. And the conference seems to be okay. So let's look at our calendar. We are on the second last week of the semester. You have a couple more assignments to go. This week, assignment 4.1. That's the assignment that we're going to talk about later today. Will be due this Thursday. It's quite simple. Okay, it doesn't really concern any kind of game. It's just the user input before they log on to your game. So it should be quite easy to do. And we'll talk about that. So we'll spend about 15 minutes to half an hour at the most to talk about that one. And we have a couple discussion assignments. And also there's a second one, the assignment 4.2, which is to take your chessboard that you create last time. Instead of making a chess game, we'll make a checker game out of it. So please go ahead and read it, and we may work on a little bit of it on Thursday. Okay, but it does require you to do the manipulation of the chessboard you have created last time. So if you have not, I believe all of you submitted that assignment already, so you should be good to go. Just to upgrade that particular program to support the checker game. Okay, we'll talk about it on Thursday. Then it will be the final project next week. There is no final exam for this class. So all of your work is based on assignments. And some of you are late on the assignments. As you remember, at the beginning of the semester, we have mentioned there is a late policy on the assignment submission. So please review that, make sure you are not too late. And of course, the semester ended on the 28th of this month. So everything needs to be submitted by that day. Otherwise, it will not be accepted. Okay? Even if you do not have the assignment completed, please submit your partial work. At least I can give you some credit. If you do not submit anything, there will be no credit for that particular assignment. So please do what you could and submit your assignment even though it's not quite completed. But try your best to do that first. Okay? Let's take a look on our module. We are on the second last module of the class. We complete the form. Today we'll talk about event model. Okay, how to handle events. And we'll talk about DOM events also by the W3C organization. And of course you have a couple assignments. But those assignments really have not too much to do with the events. It's testing your skill of what you have learned on the forms and other JavaScript capability. Okay. And next week, the final week, we're finishing up with some of the other features. The rollover, some slideshows. I think that's the final project you have to do. And then the window frames and how to use JavaScript on slideshows. That will be all we covered for this particular class. Okay. Let's begin. As you remember, this particular module, we cover chapter 6 and 8. We also cover a little bit of chapter 7, which is on regular expression. But we use the internet version of that because they have more simple example compared to what they have in the book, which is a little bit more complicated. I hope you have read what we have, go over on the internet site, and then read the book and understand more about regular expression, because that is a powerful tool in case you need to do string matching. Okay. If you have any question, please post your question on the discussion forum, so others and myself can help you on that too. Okay. Now, let's look at what we have on the book for this particular subject, events. Before we talk about events, let's take a quick look on how to handle events first. Okay, just the mechanism, how to do that. Then we'll talk more detail in what events are and what type of events and how W3C DOM model of the events. Okay, you look at chapter 8. First, look at some of the basic events when the window or the document was loaded. On focus, on load, we have talked about on load, and I believe we have used it multiple times. And there are also on mouse down, on focus. Some of you are already familiar with those, and you have tried it on your assignment also. So that's good. Okay, if you're not, please read the book and look at more detail what that particular event means and how you can make use of it when you start the JavaScript. The book have pretty good examples, step-by-step explanation of each of the, almost each lines, what they do. And it is a good learning vehicle if you're not familiar with how to handle events. So I urge you to follow the example they give you on the book. Okay, that will help you understand how, in general, we handle events. And the first thing we do, of course, is on the initialization of the page. And you have used window on load previously, but what if you need to do initialization of multiple things, and you cannot do window on load multiple times, because every time you do a window on load, it will override the previous one, so it will not help you. So there's a way to set it up. When you do a window on load, it will call a function, and then you can execute multiple function calls. And the example provided you in the book at the beginning of chapter 8 show you that. So all you have to do is add a new function called add on load and create 3 additional functions to add on the list. Now this particular part is for different purpose. In case there was another function created earlier, you have to make sure it executed before your new function execute. That's all it does for the if clause here. If it was not defined previously, then window on load just call the new function, which will do 3 functions instead of 1. So that's how you do that. You want to call 3 functions or multiple functions when you do a window on load. Okay, take a look on it. This is a technique you may need when you do more complicated on load function. So there's step-by-step explanation on it, so you can go ahead and read it, and I'm not going to go over that in class here. Okay. Second, also talk about other events like on unload, on before unload. Okay, make sure you know the differences between those two. Obviously, on unload is when you leave the page, but on before unload is before you leave the page. Okay, take a look on it, and sometimes you may need to use them. Okay, And there are other events like on reside, on move, abort. So take a look on those. We are not going to go over or use any unless you want to make your web page more dynamic or more interesting. So you can use some of those. But in this particular class, since it's the first time you use JavaScript, for this class purpose, we are not going to use most of it. Okay, but make sure you understand what those events means in case you need to use them. Okay, many of those. Oops, too far. More important is the mouse event. Okay, you need that when you do the last final project on mouse events, or even the next one on the checkerboard. Okay, on click is one of the mouse events. Of course, we have been using it. So make sure you understand and how to use some of the mouse events. On mouse move, mouse down, mouse click, you have used it. Okay. Good examples doing that. So please review that. Okay. The next topic in the book is the form event handling. We have go over that a little bit last time when we talked about forms. Basically the on submit event. Okay. And there are others like on reset, on change. So you could use them as needed, but for your particular assignment, you probably do not need to do that. But it would be nice to understand what it means when you need to use them. There are other topics in the book about key events, okay, and advanced event handling, and which we will not cover in this class. But if you're interested in doing it, please go over those. And that's the DOM level 2 event handler. Okay, we basically focus on the level 1, the generic general ones in this class. That's what we will cover in this particular book. So I urge you to read it. Chapter 8 is much better. Chapter 7 is hard to read because of the examples they provide. It's just difficult to follow. But chapter 8 is pretty good. So go ahead and read the book and follow the examples they have a better understanding how to handle events if you are not familiar with that. Okay, I think this is a good section of the book doing that. That's all in the book. So you go ahead and read it as your reading assignment. We'll go back to our class module. As we said, today we are going to talk about event model, and then on Thursday we are talking about DOM events. Okay. Just like last time, we are not going to use much of the book in the class here or any slides. So we are going to the external website to go over the examples and explanation, what events are and what it means to you as a developer. Okay, so follow the link in that module, event model. Okay, that will guide you to this particular website. I think this is the same website as we used last time on the form. So it gives you a brief introduction of events, how it started it. So if you're interested, go ahead and read it. Obviously, the event is the ingredient for handling interactive web pages. Your web pages will react to events occur on the page triggered by the user. Okay, that's the event. But before we do, let's go ahead and make sure see anyone's online. I don't think Shane can make it today, so I don't see him online. But my camera and speaker are good. Okay, that's good. And then my YouTube recording is still good, so I think we are okay. Let's go back to that particular website. So events originally was created in the Netscape 2, version 2, to handle what the user wants and to interactively deal with that. So those are the event handler that created for the HTML element back in Netscape 2 a while back. Of course, things change. A lot of things changed, okay? Well, we can learn something from the history here. This is the basic structure, how to handle events. So basically it's on click on a particular element on a form. Then you will say that particular element was clicked and the link was clicked. Okay, but before it go to a different form, you can do a handling on the on-click event. Here is a simple alert just to tell the user that particular link was clicked. But you could use that same mechanism, just like what we have done on on-click, to call a JavaScript function to interactively verify the data or do something that you need with the form. Okay, so it started all from here. Okay. The reason the newer version of event handlers are different is just because they are a lot more than just a mouse click. There are a lot more events that we have to handle. So we need better way or better mechanism to handle it. Okay. So of course all the browsers evolve into different way of handling events, and unfortunately there are compatibility problems. Okay. W3C try to provide standards how events are defined based on the DOM model. Okay. But unfortunately, like other vendor, Microsoft and other will have their own way of doing things. And even Netscape, the original creator of the events, have different way of handling events than the W3C DOM model. So you will say, how to handle it? Of course, in your code, you can use the if-else statement. If that particular browser is Netscape, then you do a certain thing, and if it's not, if it's Explorer, you do the Microsoft way. So that's a straightforward way. But there are problems. First of all, there are multiple versions of Netscape and Explorer. If you do that, then your if statement is going to be long. Okay, it is very difficult to do programming this way. And also it's not reliable. Okay, we'll take a look on that. Okay, but before we do, let's take a look on the W3C DOM model first. Just click on that one. Of course, we want to conform to the W3C model as much as we could, because most browsers will do that, except some exception like Microsoft. But more so when they support HTML5, okay, which they do now, most of them, and you will see more features are supported and they are more in sync. So following the W3C model is the better way to do that. Okay. And in this class, we are only talk about W3C level 1 DOM model. Okay. You want the advanced handling, you have to go through the DOM level 2. Okay. Just like we said in the book. Since you already have DOM experience and prerequisite for this class, so you kind of know DOM is like a tree structure. Okay, it's like a tree structure. And each of the tree has a node. Okay, let's take a look on the example here. What is a node? For this simple HTML statement, you have two nodes already. One is the P node, the paragraph node, as an element. The other one is the actual text node within that paragraph. So just by one statement here, you already have two nodes. Why we have to do that? Because in the DOM model, you use the dot notation. You can address to individual elements or node within the elements. So you have to know how the nodes are created based on the DOM model. So you can address to that particular area as needed, like this particular case. The paragraph itself is the element node, and then the text itself is a text node. If you add more elements into that statement, then you create a tree structure with the bold letter for the paragraph, and then the original text. So you have a tree branch of 2. Okay. So you have a tree of 2 children from the P elements. Okay. So you know that already. So I assume you have previous class explaining how it works. Other than the elements, we also have the attribute nodes. Attribute nodes are like the alignments, color, attribute of the element. Okay? Not the data itself, or not the node itself. It's the attributes for that particular elements, like alignments. Okay? For that, they are separate branch, like this case. The same thing, you can use the DOM model, go through JavaScript using the dot notation, address to individual attribute nodes, and change the attribute of that particular element based on that. So that's how DOM works. Okay. So of course, if you look at from the top, from the body, okay, there are multiple nodes, you have different elements, and each element can have data nodes and also attribute nodes. Okay, that's how you walk through the DOM. Now, once you have the better understanding of DOM, then you can use the dot notation to walk through the list and find an element. Just like we talked about last time, if you do not have a name for that particular node, you can use a array notation to address to each element. Sometimes it's good to do, just like we did last time, to do the array form, because you can use then a for loop to cycle through each element within that particular node or element. Okay? So like this case, you can do, or you can do an array format. Okay? That's the basic DOM level 1. Okay? Multiple ways of doing it. Or you can use to get the element by the tag name and then use the array form. Once you do that, then you'll get all the elements, and then you can address to the first element by the tag name B. Okay, see more and more examples here. You can also, of course, changing the values of that. Okay? Then you say why we have to talk about it again, since you have learned it already. Because it is important, you have to have a full understanding of how to addressing or access to individual element within the DOM model, the tree, the nodes, in order to use your JavaScript to manipulate the data, like this case. Okay? All we have to do is write functions and then access to the element and change them if it's needed. Now you will see here why we do this. We'll talk about next. Okay? So let's go back. Then we'll talk about why we do things like that. Okay, basically, just give you a brief introduction, is instead of testing which browser, we are testing a particular elements or objects that's supported by this browser before we actually use the object. That's more or a better way to do things, to detect browser capability. Okay, we'll move on to talk about that. Let's go back. So that's the W3C DOM model, level 1 model. Okay, just like we said last time, if you want to do checking browser and making sure you support this feature, that feature based on the browser, based on the different version, it could be pretty complicated. So it's not recommended. So even though we know browser compatibility is a problem, but we have other way to do it, is a better way. Okay, a simplified way. So do not do browser detection. Okay. Even though browser detection is available, and you can check out different information on the browser by using which browser. However, it's not consistent, and not all the browsers support that. The information you get may be different, so that's why it's not recommended. And also there are many different versions of it, and support different way how browser manipulate your data. So definitely not a good way to do it. Okay, but you could use it, but it's just not a recommended way, even though it's available. Okay. Instead, we'll use another way called object detection. Object detection. What is that? So we always say no to browser detection because it's not consistent. Okay, even though it may work 90%, but still there are some other users that may be using some browsers that are out of that detection that you have, then it will not work. Okay. So what we're going to do? Some other people also like to use JavaScript version. Okay, just check JavaScript, which version, and then see whether it support that particular feature. But that is also not very consistent, and particularly when you have different version of the browser. So that's not a good feature to do. So say no to that. Instead, we're going to use a method called object detection. Okay, so that means whenever we treat elements, methods here in JavaScript like an OO design, right? Objects. So before we use a particular feature, we can test whether that feature is available. Then it really doesn't matter which browser you're using. That particular feature you're going to use next will work, guaranteed, because you have detected that the browser support that feature. So it's, instead of looking at the JavaScript version, the browser type or version number, you directly go into the browser and ask, do you support this, before I use it? If it does, then you're free to use it, right? So that's more direct and simplified way of detecting, a more accurate way to detect the browser version supporting that particular feature that you're going to use. Make sense? Okay. Let's take a look on it. For example, you want to check whether that feature, document images, are supported. You can just test document.image using an if statement, and if it's supported, then you do whatever image manipulation you need on your HTML. Others are like window focus. Instead of calling the focus function, you're testing. Okay, so make sure there's no brace, no brackets. Okay, so you're not calling that particular function or method, but you are testing whether that particular function exists, or the browser have access to this particular method function. Okay, so make sure syntax is slightly different, like this case. If you do this with the parentheses there, that means you're calling that particular function, focus function. But without that, that means you're testing whether that particular function exists or supported by that browser. Okay, so two different things. But that's the beauty of it. If you can test whether that's supported by the browser, then you can go ahead and call the function, right? Because you know for sure, guarantee. Okay, it works because you tested. Like this case, if you do a test first, you come back true, that means the browser supports it, then you go ahead and call it. You can do else. If it doesn't support it, then you just prompt the user, say this browser, your browser do not support this function, so you cannot do certain thing. Okay, that's how you do object detection. You always test a particular function you need before you use it. Now, this is a tricky part. So does that mean every function you use, you're going to test it? You probably don't want to do that. Otherwise, your code is too complicated and too long. Okay. Some of the importance you want to do, you create a special feature that you need and you must have. Whatever you must have, you want to test that. Okay. And some of the features you know are not fully supported by different browsers, then you want to test it. However, as we know, all the browsers are getting updated. Most of the standard features are supported. Okay, you really do not have to test it as long as it supports JavaScript. Most of the standard features are supported, so there's no need to do that. But if you're not sure and you really need that feature in order for your JavaScript or HTML to work the way you like it, then yes, go ahead and test it and make sure it works first before you use it. Okay, but if they are really standard features for JavaScript, then you do not need to do that. Okay, that's how you do object detection. Okay, the rule of thumb is if it's important to you, then you want to test it. Okay, to make sure it works. Okay, let's go back. So let's take a look on the event compatibility tables. Okay, now of course that changed since we have browser updated all the time. So things change. Okay, but it would be nice to take a look on it and see what type of differences there are. So in general, there are traditional way handling event, the W3C way and the Microsoft way. Okay, they converge. So the differences on those become less and less as newer versions come up. So that's the good news. Okay, so you can see some of the differences here when you're handling different events. Okay. Oops, cannot move over. Okay. So you can see when the element lost focus. So some of them are older version, Microsoft way, Firefox, Safari, Chrome. Okay. So it depends which version.
You are currently the only person in this conference.
Why does it tell me that? Oh, no. Whoa. Oh, sorry, Shane. Shane is online. Ooh. Interesting. I lost the full screen mode for some reason. It was working. Let me start it again. Good thing Shane tell me that. I don't know how much I lost on that presentation. And there's no presentation, but a full screen mode going to the website. Shane, okay, let me go back to the full screen mode once more. Let me make sure the recording is still working. Yes. I don't know why. I'm sure I started it because I saw the blue boundary on the full screen mode previously, but so for some reason the full screen mode stopped. Okay, good. At least we know the YouTube version will record the screen, so you will see on the YouTube version. Okay, so let's go back to the full screen mode one more time. Now I see the full screen mode again. Okay, that's good. Thanks, Shane, for checking on that. So I was going over this, Shane, on this. I don't know when you joined. Basically, we do not use any presentation slides. Just like last time, we talk about what is in the book, chapter 8, and then now we are going over the website. We follow the link on the event model and came to this website just like we did last time, and look at the event and the history of it, and we talk about browser detection, which is not recommended, nor the JavaScript version. Recommended to use the object detection, so we just go over that, and now we come down to just take a look on the browser compatibility table, looking at some of the features that different browser may or may not support, and which you can see is a little bit messy. Some of them are almost support and not quite support, and so you can tell some are buggy. Okay, so as I said before, if you do need that particular feature which is critical to your page or website, you want to test it before you use it. Okay, that's the object detection mechanism. Okay, but the good thing is the newer browser are more compatible. Okay, but there's no guarantee they're 100%, so it would be nice to do that. Okay, so this is how, take a look on how bad it is on the compatibility issue of those browsers. Okay, as I said before, if you have problem seeing the full screen, because I don't know how long I lost the full screen, go ahead and use the YouTube version. The YouTube version captures the screen, so it doesn't matter I'm on full screen mode or not, it will capture what I have on the screen, so you can follow that one instead. Okay, so far the YouTube recording is working quite well, at least the last few weeks, I think. Okay, let's go back. Okay, we just take a look on the event compatibility table, and a little bit messy, but a little bit better if you are on the newer version. Okay, so all we have to do is using object detection technique, then you should be okay. Now let's take a look on the events. Before we do, let's see whether Shane have any. Okay, so now he see it. Yeah, now he see the full screen. That's good. Okay, very good. Now let's continue. So events. All of us know what events are, but there are many different types. Okay, which is important to make your website, your HTML interesting. That means you have to add interactive things on it, and event is the things that trigger your JavaScript to do that part. So you have to understand events and which event you want to handle in order to make your website more interesting. Okay, and to do that, of course, you have to understand the DOM model, which you have just covered earlier. There are different types of events. Now we have talked briefly about chapter 8, which also includes some of the events, the mouse, okay, and some of the advanced events that we may not cover here. A few things, the interface events, okay, like resizing, scrolling, focus, unload, onload, interface events. Okay, and there are mouse events. You all know, mouse down, up, over, out. In the final project for next week, you need to do that. Okay, so take a look on the mouse events detail, since you do need to use some of them. for your final project. Okay. The forms events talk a little bit about last time. Okay, but there are more to it. We have the submit, on submit events we talked about last time. There are other events on the forms that you can detect. Okay. And you need to check it out. Okay. Then there are other W3C level 2 events. Okay. We are not going to talk much about it here. But if you already know events, you can go ahead and read it and understand more and what type of events defined there. Unfortunately, there are also Microsoft events. It's always the case. And sometimes you do have to specifically looking for them and how to handle them. Okay. So, and different browser may have also proprietary events in case you need to. Say a lot of users will be using Mozilla, then you have to verify it, and you may use some of the proprietary events. But before you use it, please make sure you detect it, because it may not be supported on other browsers. Okay. Okay. I think the last thing we want to talk about on the events here for this today is the event handler. Okay. So we talk about the oldest way of how to handle events, how to register. It all come from this. Okay, all come from this. But of course, we have different way to do it. So instead of an alert, we can actually call a function. Okay, do something before the link was executed. So before going to another page, it will call a function. Do something, whatever you need to do. Mostly you want to do verification of the data, right? That's one thing. That's something we will do today in the assignment 4.1 to verify the user input before they start the game. Okay. And sometimes people like to use mixed cases, the camel case. Okay, but of course, you know, HTML is case insensitive, so it really doesn't matter. But people like to do that. It's just the way they like it. Okay, but if you use HTML, then you have to use lowercase because it's not okay case sensitive. Okay. Then what are default action? Okay, default action. Like this case, it will do something, and after that, it will go through the link. That's the default action. It will execute it. Okay. But if you have that on-click setup, the first thing it will do is do the event handling script. Execute first. After it's done, then it will execute the default action, which is this hypertext link. Okay, but how can you stop it? In case you detect an user error, you want to stop it. You don't want to call or go to another page. Then you have to stop it. So the way I think we talked about briefly last time is by using the return value. By using the return value, we can stop or we can start or stop the default action. Like in this case, if you do two JavaScript command, one is to execute, to do something, and then you always return false. When you return false, the default action will not be executed. I think we talked about that last time, different way. Okay, So for this particular setup, that means it will not go to this hypertext link because you always return false. But of course, sometimes you don't want to do that. You may or may not, depends on what have you done on do something. So you can do checking on the return value of do something. If we return true, then you execute that default. If we return false, then you won't. Okay? So just like in this case, a lot of time when they click on a link, you may prompt the user, do you want to really go follow the link to the other website, or you are leaving this website? Confirm yes or no, right? So you can do a return on the confirmation. So when the user hit yes, okay, then it will go to that link, and if it doesn't, cancel, then it will not. Okay, so pretty straightforward. Okay. Of course, there are other events you can handle on the window, like this window status, but there is a particular one that we want to talk about is this. Okay, it's a keyword. It's a keyword that you can use. This means that particular owner of a function. Okay. Or in a event handling situation, it is the HTML element that the event occurred on. Why we want to do that? Because when your event handler function is called, you want to know which particular element the user select or click on, so you can do the appropriate action based on the element, because you may have different elements that you want to manipulate using your JavaScript. So by passing that element, this, into the do something, you can then check which element is involved in this event. That's useful. Otherwise, you have to find out what particular one was clicked. We're passing this to the function, and you already know. Okay? In this case. Okay? So once you have that particular object coming in, because inside the click, on click, you call to something with this element. So now you have the object of this hypertext link. All you have to do is check on using the DOM model. Now you already know the element using href. Okay, then you know which particular website or HTML they want to link to. So you can prompt the user, do you want to leave this page or go to that page? Okay, so simple way of using this, getting the elements involved in that event, and then you get the data from the element to process it. So pretty straightforward, but very useful technique. Okay, when you want to handle events, so you know which particular elements or objects that you need to work on by passing this to a function for the event handler. Okay, so that's the technique. Two things here. One is using the return value true or false of a event handler to determine whether the default function or action will be executed or not. That's one thing we learned first. Second is using this keyword to indicate which element you have selected for that action, or the user have selected for the action, passing that particular object to your function so that your function know which particular event or event handler is to handle it. Okay, like this case, it's just a prompt. It's simple enough. In other case, you may manipulate the elements based on the object. Since you already know which object the event occurs on, you can manipulate the object or changing the object attributes as needed by doing what's needed inside your JavaScript. So those are the two things we learned about how to handle basic events. Okay, and two techniques. One is the return value, one is the this keyword to help you. Let me see. I think that's all we cover material-wise for today. Let's go back to the full screen. Yeah, Shane is still there. And let me see what else. Okay. And make sure the YouTube recording. It lost the full screen again. Something is wrong with the full screen. Don't know what happened. But at least the YouTube recording is still working. But I lost the full screen mode again. I don't know why. Something wrong with the full screen mode. It keeps kicking me out. I didn't do anything different. I just go to the website. But somehow it keeps kicking me out on the website. But anyway, let's go back again. But at least we know the YouTube version works, okay? And but somehow I don't know what happened. Maybe when I do forward and back on the browser, it kicked me out of the full screen mode. Possible, but I'm not sure. This is the first time I experienced this. Let's do one more time, and I'll pay attention next time when I do forward and back on the full screen. And but good thing about it is we have the YouTube version that will capture the full screen anyway, so we should not miss anything. But I'll make sure I pay attention to this next time. Now I'm on the full screen mode again. Okay, but something was not good for some reason. Okay, that's all of the material that we should cover today on events and event handling. Not in depth. Okay, pretty basic. Tells you the history and differences when you use different browsers and how you do detection by using object detection, and some basic mechanism how to handle events and trigger or not triggering the default action by returning true or false on your Java functions. Okay. Of course, the book and this website have covered a lot more, and if you have the time, please go ahead and read them and try to use some of the features explained in the book and on this website for your final project. Okay, but minimum, you have to understand and learn what we have covered today, if you could. Okay. And next, we will take a break, and after we come back, we will talk about assignment 4.1, which is the computer game element. Okay, we'll take a look on it. And the next one due this Sunday is the checkerboard, by using your chessboard you created last time and convert it into a checkerboard game. Okay. But they will cover that on Thursday. But today we will talk about the computer game elements assignment due this Friday, or Thursday actually, due Thursday. Okay, that's what we're gonna do. So let's take a break, 5 minutes break before we continue. Okay, let's check on Shane. Everything is still good, and then the recording is still good. So we have to make sure the YouTube recording is good, because since we lost full screen on part of my lecture, so we rely on that. Okay, let's stop here for 5 minutes, and we'll come back and talk about the assignment. Thank you. Okay, I'm back. Let's take a look on our screen. Okay, good. So our full screen is still working. I do see the blue boundary, the speaker, and then the camera seems to be responding. And let's check the YouTube recording. Seems it's active, so we look okay. I think we are good to go. Okay, let's close out this one. So the second part of this lecture is to go over assignment 4.1, and I do see that the material in this class is not very complicated. In fact, out of all 4 students here, all have good background on programming and even have good experience on JavaScript. So really even better than I have, I think. So that's why I go over the material a little bit quicker. However, since this is a class, it is very important for you to submit your assignments. This is a short class too, 7.5 weeks. And I know you may have other work, maybe at work, you may have other classes and other activities, family issues, and so you may be behind on assignments. But as I remind you earlier in the class, there is a late policy for the class, okay? It's in the announcement section. So go ahead and read it if you don't remember. So I am pretty easy in general. I set the policy quite high, saying 20% deduction for 1 week late, with 1 week to 2 weeks late, and 40%. But so far, I don't think I have taken 40% out of anyone's assignment when they're late. But I will start doing that because this is the end of the semester. You really cannot be late anymore. If you are not going to learn enough, or you're not making the grade for this class. So I will enforce the late policy. Okay, 20% off when 1 week or less late, and 40% off for 2 weeks or less late. Okay, of course after 2 weeks you cannot submit it anymore because that's the end of the semester, which is the 28th, which is next Friday. Okay, nothing else can be submitted after next Friday because I will finalize the grade for the class after that date. So whatever you submitted has to be submitted before or on that date, before or on that date. Okay, and you really only have a couple assignments left and some discussion sessions that you chime in. So those are easy, but the assignment is not too complicated except the final project. And so you should be able to finish them with your experience. Okay, so a matter of finding the time. Okay, finding the time to do that. That's what I'm urging you. And of course, if you need some help, in case you need some help in some of the assignment, I usually do that at the end of the lecture. So review that, and then it will speed up, your work, and hopefully you can finish the assignment quicker that way. That's what we're going to do next, to look at this particular assignment. Okay. Now the title itself is misleading. Computer game elements. We really have nothing to do with the computer game. Okay, so don't worry about it. We are not asking you to develop a game at this point. Okay. This assignment really is just asking the user for input, 4 entries. Okay, separate text field. Asking for the player's name, the username, the player's point total, the health and damage, which I'm not that familiar with, and weapons, which I kind of know what it is. So I think the health and damage is the magnitude, or how well they're doing at this point. So it's probably a number or a grade, but I'm not that familiar with games. Okay, I'm not a game developer. So I know weapons. Those are some weapons that you use for the games. So basically, you have 4 fields that your user will enter, and you have to use your Java form, JavaScript, to manipulate your form, to validate them before they can start the game. So really, it's nothing to do with the game itself. It's just a form. Okay, they enter 4 elements in the forms, and then you have to validate those items when they hit a submit button. Okay, so it's kind of what we have talked about and used it last week and today. Okay, so that's all it is. Nothing to nothing to do with the game. It's a validation of the user input. It's a validation of the user input on a form. Okay, on an event on the form. Then you verified it and making sure inputs are good before you let the user use your game. So it's a front end for your game before they start it. Okay, make sense? So to the minimum, you use those 4 items, and when you're done, you need to display them on a different window. Oops. After submit, they output 4 items on a separate text field on the same page, not a new window, okay? On the same page, just like before. You output those 4 values on the same page with the user input. That's it. So it's not very complicated. You should be able to finish it very quickly with what you already know and what you have done previously. Okay, so remember the movie title, that particular assignment a couple weeks ago? You basically can use the same similar thing, right? Instead of 1 text entry, you have 4, and then you display them on a separate window, just like a separate text area, just like we did last time on the movie title. Okay, let's begin. Let's start Eclipse. Okay, before we look at Eclipse, we want to make sure, since I start the application, make sure speaker is good, webcam is good, full screen is still working. It's good. And then we'll look at the YouTube recording. It is still good. So we are good to go. Okay. So now let's take a look on Eclipse. So basically, we have a simple form. Whatever form you have the username, weapons, whatever that is, a simple form. And then of course we don't want to do anything, just do nothing, right? You do a whatever function you want to call. You check the items. Okay, with 4 items, there's a form, 4 items. Okay, and when you do a submit, on submit, it will call a JavaScript function in your JavaScript file, and I always return false. The reason is we don't have a default action. Okay.
You are currently the only person in this conference.
Oh, I think Shane just dropped off. Let me double check. Yeah. Okay. Good. He said, "Oh, it's working," so everything is still working anyway. Yeah, he's quite experienced on JavaScript, so this should be easy for him anyway. Yeah. So I think we are all good. I'm the only one, so I keep track of the YouTube recording and then the full screen mode. Make sure we are all good. Okay. So let's continue with Eclipse. Okay. So that's it. A simple form of 4 elements. Then you do a check, and it's up to you. You always return false because you don't want to take any action, default action. Now on your job, you feel like I'm giving you the final solution, which I did not. Basically, I give you a little bit of it, and then you have to finishing up. Okay, but this part is pretty easy, straightforward, just like what we have done previously. So I don't have problem showing you that. So first thing you want to check, like this particular case, I think I showed you the same thing last time, is to verify using a loop, a for loop, to check it. Make sure all 4 elements, because from 0 to 3, 4 elements inside the example form. I'm using the dot notation. From the document, you look at the example, which is the form, and the elements inside the form, and there are 4 of them, 4 elements. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4 in the form. The form name is example. So from the document, you go to the example, you go to the element, and there are 4 elements inside the form. So you go over them using a loop, okay, using the indexing, and making sure the value inside each element is not 0. Is not 0. Okay. If it's 0, then you return false, and you give them a message, and you refocus on the box, and then you return, say you didn't enter, you have not filled in that particular box. Okay, and you do check on all of them using a loop. So any of them is empty, you return false and prompt them a alert message. So that's a quick way using a loop to check, make sure all items were filled in. So this is a quick check. Okay, and after that, now that's easy, right? After that, then you have to, for the assignment, I don't have to do that, but for you have to do another function call, say check or validate. Do a validate function to validate each of the data that they enter are good. Okay, so you need to do that. Like username should not start with a theoretically, username should always be just alphabetical number, but it could have numbers. I don't know, maybe Charles III or something, but it will not be a Arabic number. It should be but you should do a check on the username, make sure all alphabets. And weapons also can be any character, right? I don't know what kind of weapons name, but like total pawns, it should be numbers only. It's pawns, right? Total numbers only. Or if there's a range of the pawns, like 10,000 is the maximum range, then you should check that too. I didn't do that here. Okay, so for this particular one, I do a simple case, create a form of 4 elements. Each of them has name. Instead of ID, I use names. You can get element by ID. Remember that? Get element by ID. Okay. Of course, we can also have ID for each of the element. Then you can do get element by ID. But since we are trying to use the DOM model, okay, so we would like to use the dot notation, document.example user and value. Okay, so we try to use the dot notation going through the DOM tree. That's what we have talked about the last couple of weeks, using the DOM way of accessing the data. So instead of get element by ID, we get those elements by using the name defined within the DOM tree of that particular node. Remember the node. So now we have the document example, and the element is user name, and then we can address to the value of that particular element. Okay, so what I'm doing here is, after we validate, make sure they're all filled in, and you should do more validation, which I didn't do. You should call this particular function, whatever you want to name it, to validate the data. Just as I said before, has to be numeric value. I think this one should be numeric value also, and those should be alphabets only. Okay, or this is alphanumerical, and this is alphabet only. Okay. So those things you need to check inside your function call, which I didn't implement here. And after that, you need to display called display function to display the information, those 4 items, onto a separate window by using a DOM, okay, way of addressing the elements. So when you run, okay, it will bring up a form. Now make sure you use form. The requirement for this particular assignment is you have to use form. And events, this particular event we use is on submit event. Okay, so make sure you use the form. Oops. Okay, then you display all 4 text fields for the user to enter, and I have a separate window for displaying the information once they have hit the submit button. The reset is not a requirement, but it's nice to have. Okay. Okay. So type in, since I already did it before, the weapon I have none, and health 100, 999. Okay, so once the user enter those values, you will do a check, make sure they fill in. Say if I did not enter this and I submit the form, then you will alert the user you have not filled in the point total. You will alert the user which field they did not complete and refocus on that. Or of course you can display, you put one more element in your form, you can display, okay, the error here if that's what you want to. Either way, you must tell the user they did not fill in a particular thing. Either way, okay, you must do that. For this particular lab assignment, you need to do that. If everything is correct, or say if they type in a number here instead of alphabets, then you need to also prompt them. Of course, my program doesn't do that. Okay, but your program must do a verification of the inputs. Make sure the name field is correctly entered, not a number, and making sure those are the correct field. Okay, I will test that. Make sure you verify it. If you don't, then I'll take out points. The purpose of this is to do the verification, okay, and the event. Say if they have entered everything correctly after you verified it, then you do submit, and then it will display the user inputs with the proper names on them. Okay, then you're done. That's what it is. Okay, so this assignment is not difficult. It built upon what you have done previously on a form. If you didn't use a form last time, then you should do it this time. Last time, I think on my example, I only used just a text field inside body. I did not create a form. But for this particular one, you have to use a form. You must. That's the requirement, because we want you to use the submit button on submit in order to manipulate the form to do the action and to trigger and not to trigger the default action based on the input verification. Okay, based on the input verification. So it is important to do check, make sure they are not empty, and make sure the values are correct before you display the data. This should not be returned true, it should be returned false. Oh, this one doesn't matter. Yeah, this should be returned false. Because we don't want, for this particular case, it really doesn't matter. Normally you would do return true and return false here, but in this case it really doesn't matter because we always return false. It's a two separate statement. Okay, so always return false. So that means it will never take the default action anyway. So it doesn't matter on this case. But no matter what, that's what you need to do. Okay, ask the user for 4 value, validate them, and then display them on a separate text area. But you must validate the data before you output it. If it's not, then you have to prompt them a particular field that they did not enter properly. Minimum requirement, since I am not familiar with others, minimum requirement for username, you have to check, make sure they're alphabets. Weapons can be alphanumerical data. Health, this one I'm not 100% sure, so it's up to you what you verify. But for total points, it must be a numeric value. Those three fields must be alphabet, could be alphanumerical, and this must be numeric value. Okay, those 3 you must check based on that criteria. This particular one, since I'm not familiar with on the games, so I believe they're numbers, but that's something you can verify based on your knowledge on that game or whatever games that you try to design. That one I'm not tight on it, but the other one like this must be numeric, so those must be checked properly. I would type in a alphanumerical value to test it. Make sure you test it. Of course, I'll look at your code also to make sure it's done properly. Okay. Let me see. Oh, the full screen mode went away again. I don't know what happened really. Something wrong with the full screen mode today, I think. Yeah, the full screen went away again. No, the full screen mode say it's working, but I don't see the blue bar. Oh, it is still there. Okay, it's just I couldn't see it inside Eclipse. It got blocked. So the full screen mode seems to be still working, so that's good. Good to know. I thought it's gone. Okay, so that's what it is for this assignment. Okay, quite simple. It's an extension of what you have done previously, so it should not take you long. But then you should focusing on looking at the next assignment. Oh, make sure everything's still working first. Okay. Yeah, the YouTube is still working too. That's good. So you should, this 4.1 should be quite simple. You should looking at 4.2. Okay. So let's do a quick explanation what that is. So basically you take a look, use what you have last time. You create a chessboard. Okay, 8x8, basically 8x8 chessboard, right? But instead of creating a chess game, we will make it simpler, a checker game. Okay. So what you have to do is use the checkerboard, the board that you have last time, 8x8 board. Okay, and then place pieces onto the board. Okay, you place pieces onto the board. In fact, I'm not honestly familiar with checker game. I know what it is, but I never played it. So it is just like your chessboard. Okay, 8x8. Okay, and then you place the pieces on it. I think there's I want an image with the pieces on it. So basically 2 different color. Well, it's just a board. It doesn't have the checkers there. That's why. So place the pieces on it. So this is the 8x8 board. Okay. You place the pieces on it. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So there are 12 pieces on each side. Okay, 12 pieces on each side. Then you want to place it onto the board. I think this is the better. Yeah. Okay. To start with, you need to have 12 pieces for each side to put on the board. So that's what your image will start look like. You have the 8x8 board, and you have to put 8 images on it. I'm sorry, 12 images on each side. I think it's wrong. I think this should be on the white card for different side to start with. But either way is fine. I don't really care about the game itself. More so is how you place the checker. Okay, you put the pieces. Okay, the pieces on the board. That should be easy too. Just like changing color, right? You can include an image for that particular square. Okay, so that should be easy. However, the next step is allow the user to move a piece. So basically you have to move one from one to the other. Okay, so click on one and move it to the next. So here they limited the move is only 1 square at a time, so that's okay. Okay, that's your assignment. Okay, need a little bit more thinking. Okay, for now you're restricted to 1 square at a time. That's okay. Just showing me that you are capable moving a piece, that's all. So what you need to do is using the board, display the pieces, the checker pieces on the board, and the last thing is allow the user to move 1 piece, 1 square at a time. That's it. And you're done. So a little bit more complicated. Okay. So please spend some time, work on it, because it's due this Sunday. Okay. So 4.1 should be quite easy, just like we talked about today. 4.2 need you to do a little bit more. So please be prepared. And we will talk about it on Thursday, this Thursday, on assignment 4.2. But if you look ahead, we only have 1 week left, and you have 2 more assignments to go. So don't delay. You're not going to have enough time to finish it. Okay? Please don't delay. Finishing up 4.1, 4.2, and then start looking at the assignment, the final 2 assignments. Okay? Ahead of time. Otherwise, you will not have time to finish it next week. Because I will not accept any late assignment beyond next Friday. Okay? Last day to submit anything, including those 2 assignments, is next Friday. So please look ahead and work on those now if you could. I think with the knowledge that you folks have, you should be able to work on those already without going through the lecture material. Okay? In fact, you have learned enough. You should be able to do most of it. So please start doing it, and don't delay until next week, since you have 2 assignments for a short week next week. So you need to do that earlier. Okay? And your final grade is based on those, because there's no quizzes or no final exams, or based on assignments and discussions. As you know, the discussion, I am pretty easygoing unless you're late. Okay, so you should have good score on those. So everything else is really based on your assignment score. So please don't delay on those. Okay? Let me see. That's it today. Let's make sure things are still working. Looks like they are. and full screen actually is still working. So we are good, and Shane already left. So but the speaker and the camera seems to be working. So that's all for today. We will end today now. And as I said, more important is for you to review the material and look ahead on those assignments, particularly for next week, since we don't have much time left, so you can finishing them on time. Okay, thanks for joining. Thanks for reviewing this, and I hope it works out. Thanks a lot. Bye bye. I will stop the recording now. Okay, go to YouTube. Also stop the YouTube recording.